hadn't planned to be back in Crestwood for the summer. I told myself I was only here because the internship I wanted fell through and my off-campus apartment lease ended 2 weeks before finals. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I needed a pause, a breather from dorm room noise and fluorescent lecture halls, from expectations and uncertainty and that constant pressure to figure out who I was supposed to become. So I packed a duffel, tossed it in the back of my dad's old car, and drove 3 hours south, back to the small town I had spent most of my life wanting to escape. Crestwood hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks near Main Street, same rusty swings in the park where I broke my arm when I was 9, same sleepy post office where the old guy at the counter still called me kid. The only thing different really was me. I'd been gone for 3 years. I left as a boy trying to grow up fast. Now I'd returned, taller, leaner, more tired, and unsure if I actually knew anything more than I did back then. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I saw her. I was standing in line at the pharmacy, waiting to pick up some allergy meds, when a familiar voice floated in from the next aisle, calm, clear, slightly amused. "I told you, Harold, I don't need a cane, just Advil." I turned my head instinctively, and there she was, Ms. Carter, my 11th grade English teacher. She looked the same, but not really. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few silver strands mixed in with the dark brown I remembered. She wore a light blouse tucked into jeans and carried a woven bag on her shoulder. Her posture was straighter than most women her age, but there was something softer in her face now, less strict, more open. She turned slightly, catching my stare. Our eyes met. There was a brief flicker, recognition, surprise, and then that warm smile that used to settle an entire classroom. "Jake!" I stepped forward, smiling despite myself. "Hi, Ms. Carter." "Oh God, please don't call me that. I'm retired now," she laughed. "It's just Rachel. Retired." That word landed in my chest with more weight than I expected. She couldn't have been more than 45. "Rachel," I repeated a little awkwardly. She looked me over, head tilting just slightly. "You're taller. College meal plans. All protein and regret." She laughed. That soft, rich sound that made you want to keep talking, just to hear it again. "I can't believe it's really you," she said. "How long has it been?" 3 years, give or take. "Wow, you disappeared on us." "You gave me an A- on my final paper," I teased. "I had no choice." "Oh please, that paper was a little dramatic. Even for you." I laughed. Guilty. We stood there for a moment in silence, not awkward, just unprepared, like neither of us had expected this version of the other. "You back for the summer?" she asked. "Yeah, just got in 2 days ago. Crashing at my mom's until I figure things out." "Same address. Same as ever." She nodded, smiling to herself. "It's good to see you, Jake." "You too." She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "Well, if you're bored sometime, I could use help moving a few boxes in the garage. My back isn't what it used to be." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to help, but because the offer felt strangely personal. "Yeah," I said. "Sure. Just tell me when." "Tomorrow? Afternoon." "Sounds good." She reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, and scribbled her address on a receipt from her wallet. "Still the same house. But fair warning, it's messier than when I was teaching." She handed it to me. Our fingers brushed for half a second too long. Her touch was light, warm, like the edge of memory. "See you tomorrow," she said. And just like that, She turned and walked away, leaving a trail of lavender and something I couldn't name behind her. I stood there a full minute after she left, receipt in hand, brain catching up with what just happened. She used to be my teacher, and now she wasn't. The next afternoon, I stood in front of her house feeling like I was about to walk into a memory. Nothing had changed. The brick steps still had that small crack on the left corner. The flower beds along the porch were still neat, though a little overgrown. The wind chimes she used to talk about in class when we read poetry, like rhythm without music, she once said, still swayed softly beside the door. I raised my hand and knocked. A few seconds passed. Then I heard footsteps. The door opened, and there she was, Rachel. She wore a loose gray shirt tucked into soft jeans, her hair up in a messy bun, reading glasses balanced at the edge of her nose. She looked calm, like she belonged in this quiet space, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Hey," she said, her voice light. "You're early." "4 minutes early," I said. "Still counts as punctual." She smiled, stepping back to let me in. "You always were the rule follower." I stepped inside. The house smelled like old wood and cinnamon, a scent that hit me right in the chest. It was the same smell I remembered from my childhood, except now there were hints of something else, something softer, something that made the air feel heavier. "Still feels the same," I said. "Same couch, same bookshelves, new coffee maker," she said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "That's the only thing I've upgraded." The living room was warm, cluttered in a lived-in way. Books stacked in uneven towers on the side table, a faded quilt folded neatly over the armrest. A cat I didn't remember stretched on the windowsill, twitching its tail lazily. "The boxes are in the garage," she said. "Not heavy, just annoying. Mostly books, old papers I probably should have thrown out years ago." We started with the nearest stack in the hallway. She carried a small box while I took a larger one, and we made the short trip into the garage back and forth a few times. The work was easy, almost rhythmic. But what made it memorable was the conversation between the silences. "You know," she said after our 4th trip, wiping her hands on her jeans, "I always wondered what happened to you." "What do you mean?" "After graduation, you sort of disappeared. Most students I forget about, but—" She paused. "You weren't forgettable." The way she said it made my chest tighten. Not dramatically, but just enough to notice. "I guess I needed to disappear for a while," I said. "College felt like a chance to be someone else." "Did it work?" "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "Still feels like I'm figuring it out." She nodded slowly. "I get that." We stood there for a moment, surrounded by dusty boxes and the faint sound of a lawnmower in the distance. She leaned against the edge of the shelf, her eyes on the concrete floor. "When I stopped teaching last year, I thought I'd feel free," she said. "But it wasn't freedom. It was silence." I looked at her. "I loved it," she said. "Teaching, I mean, but I didn't realize how much of myself I gave away to do it. Every day, 100 kids, questions, emotions, stories. And then, nothing." She smiled faintly. "Sorry, that probably sounds dramatic." "No," I said. "It sounds like the truth." She looked at me, really looked, and something passed between us. Not a look of longing or romance, just understanding, recognition, like we both knew what it felt like to lose something we hadn't realized we were holding on to. "Want some tea?" she asked. "Sure." We moved back inside, and I followed her into the kitchen. She filled the kettle and moved with a quiet grace, like she'd done this same routine 1,000 times but never got tired of it. She pulled two mismatched mugs from the cabinet, one floral, one plain black, and dropped a peppermint tea bag into each. I leaned against the counter, watching her. "You still like peppermint, right?" she asked without turning. I blinked. "How do you remember that?" She shrugged. "Some things stick." The kettle whistled. She poured the water, handed me the black mug, and gestured to the couch. We sat in silence for a few minutes. The cat jumped down and padded into another room. The only sound was the wind outside brushing the leaves against the window. "This is the first time someone's sat on that couch in months," she said. I glanced at her. "Other than me, I mean," she added, smiling softly. "It's been a quiet year." "You live alone?" She nodded. "Divorced 3 years ago. No kids. Just me and Oscar." She nodded toward the cat. "Do you miss it?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Marriage? Noise?" Her eyes lingered on me for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, but not just any noise. Just the kind that makes a house feel alive." We drank our tea. The conversation drifted, from books to old students to how weird it is to see people you once taught become adults. She mentioned a former student who's now a lawyer, another who became a local news anchor. "And now you," she said, looking at me. "What do you want to be?" I didn't answer right away. "I used to think I'd be a writer," I said. "But then I stopped writing. And now I'm not sure." She didn't rush to respond, just nodded like she understood. "You wrote one of the best pieces I ever read," she said after a moment. "That essay about your dad's hands. You remember it?" "Yeah. It made me cry. You were 16 and you wrote like someone twice your age. I always wondered if you'd keep going." I looked down into my mug. "I was afraid it peaked too early," I said. She smiled. "Maybe it just paused." Another silence. But this one wasn't empty. It hummed, like something else had entered the room with us. Not romance, not yet, but something human. Something alive. "Would it be weird," she said suddenly, "if I said I miss talking like this?" "No," I said. "Not weird at all." She turned slightly toward me, resting her elbow on the back of the couch, her head tilted. "You were always a good listener," she said. "Even back then. Most students wanted to be heard. You wanted to understand." I looked at her, and something in me shifted. It wasn't a dramatic realization. It was quiet, gentle. She wasn't my teacher anymore, and I wasn't her student. We were just two people, both a little lost, both a little tired, sitting on a couch on a Thursday afternoon with peppermint tea and memories between us. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For showing up." I nodded. Then we sat in silence again, both of us staring out the window as the sun dipped a little lower across the rooftops. It was past 6 when she looked at the clock and blinked like she hadn't realized how long we'd been talking. "God," she said, stretching slightly, her fingers brushing the back of her neck. "You've been here for hours." "I can go," I said quickly, even though part of me didn't want to. She gave me a look. "I didn't say you had to." Her voice was soft, not playful, not teasing, just honest, like she was trying to make space for something neither of us had words for yet. The sun was beginning to fall behind the trees, spilling a warm golden light into the room. Dust floated in the air like little memories, dancing between the sunbeams. Rachel stood up, walking toward the bookshelf along the far wall. "You ever read something so many times it stops meaning anything?" she asked, running her hand across the rows of spines. All the time, I said. She pulled out a worn copy of the things they carried and looked at the cracked cover. I used to teach this every year. Every year I'd say, "This is about war and memory and truth." And every year I realized I still didn't know how to explain what it was really about. I watched her thumb through the pages, gently, like she was flipping through her past. She turned toward me. "Do you still write?" I shook my head. "Not since sophomore year. Nothing that matters, anyway." She sat back down, closer this time. "What made you stop?" I hesitated. I guess I got tired of not knowing if I was good, or if people only said I was good because they felt bad for me. She looked surprised. "People didn't say those things because they pitied you, Jake. They said them because you had something to say." I glanced down at my mug, now empty. She added, "You had a way of seeing people and putting it into words that made them feel understood. That's rare. You shouldn't throw that away just because you're afraid of being wrong." I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how, but the words stayed with me, sat with me like a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Do you remember when I caught you skipping class junior year?" I laughed, surprised. "Yeah. I told you I was just taking a personal mental health walk. You weren't impressed." "I wasn't, but I didn't report you. You made me sit in your classroom during lunch for a week instead. I didn't want to punish you. I wanted to keep you close." She looked at me. I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, but my voice was barely above a whisper. "I mean," she started, then trailed off, chewing the inside of her cheek. "You were struggling. You didn't talk to anyone, but I could see it in your writing. The loneliness, the doubt." I swallowed. "I knew something was going on," she continued, "but I didn't know how to reach you, so I kept you close, in the safest way I could." I remembered that year more clearly than I cared to admit. My parents fighting every night, me pretending everything was fine, walking around school like a ghost with perfect attendance. The only place I felt seen was her classroom. "You helped more than you know," I said quietly. "Just being there, just listening." Her face softened. "I've always wondered if I did enough." "You did." She looked down for a second, then back up. Her voice dropped, almost to a whisper. "You don't look lost anymore." "I still feel that way," I admitted. She gave me a long, unreadable look. Then, slowly, she reached toward the table and picked up a book. Not to read, not to show, just to do something with her hands. "I think the hardest part of getting older," she said, "is realizing how often you pretend. Pretend you're content. Pretend you don't miss things. Pretend you're okay with the quiet." The room felt heavy, but not uncomfortable, just real. "Are you okay with it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't know." The silence between us stretched. But it wasn't empty. It was full of all the things we didn't know how to say. Finally, I stood. "I should probably head out. It's getting late." She nodded slowly. "Yeah." But she didn't move toward the door. Neither did I. She looked up at me, eyes soft, thoughtful. Her fingers still rested on the book. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, she said, "Would you ever want to come back sometime?" I looked at her. "Yeah, I would." She nodded, almost to herself, like she was filing the answer away for later. Then she stood, walked with me to the door. We stood there for a moment, neither of us reaching for the handle. The porch light outside flickered on automatically. She said, "Thank you for today. Anytime." Her eyes lingered on mine just a little longer than expected. Then she opened the door. I stepped out into the fading light. The air was warm, still holding on to the last heat of the day. Crickets had started to hum in the bushes. I turned back. She was still standing in the doorway. And for a moment I could see it again, not Miss Carter. Not the teacher. Just her. Just Rachel. The rain started just after 7 the next evening. One of those sudden summer storms that seemed to rise out of nowhere. Hot wind, thick clouds, and then a crash of thunder like the sky couldn't hold itself together anymore. I was lying on the couch at my mom's place, flipping aimlessly through the TV, when my phone buzzed. "Rachel, hope you're staying dry. The boxes are still in my garage," mocking me. I stared at the message for a moment, smiling. It had only been a day since I'd seen her, but something in me lit up at the sight of her name. Me? I can come over and give them a stern talking to. "Rachel, if you bring wine, they might surrender." 15 minutes later, I was pulling into her driveway. The rain was coming down steadily, streaking across the windshield in diagonal lines. The porch light was on, and her shadow moved behind the curtains. I grabbed the bottle of red from the passenger seat and jogged up the steps. She opened the door before I could knock. Barefoot, hair loosely braided, wearing a navy blue sweater that hung just a little off one shoulder. "You came," she said, almost surprised. "You invited me." She stepped aside to let me in. The house was warm, filled with the soft hum of jazz playing from a speaker in the corner. The smell of something earthy, sage, maybe, lingered in the air. "I lit a candle," she said, catching my glance. "Old habit. Storms always made me nervous as a kid." I held out the bottle. "Peace offering from the Box Negotiation Council." She took it with a small laugh. "We're already making progress." We moved to the kitchen. She opened the wine and poured us each a glass. We didn't talk much at first, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, long and low, like a drumbeat in slow motion. She handed me my glass and leaned against the counter. "You ever feel like storms bring things out of you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" She took a sip. "Truth, restlessness, old memories." I thought about it. "I guess they make it harder to pretend everything's fine." She nodded. "Exactly." There was a pause. Then she said, "I always thought I'd feel freer after I left teaching." "You said that yesterday." "I did, but I didn't say how lonely it felt. Like I stepped out of a role and didn't know who I was without it." I leaned on the other side of the counter. "I think most people don't know. We just wear different masks and hope no one notices." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said softly, "What do you see when you look at me now?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away. Finally, I said, "I see someone who used to be the person holding everything together for everyone else. And maybe now, she just wants someone to see her for once." Her breath caught, barely, but I noticed. The rain picked up outside, tapping against the windows in a fast, steady rhythm. She stepped around the counter slowly, wine glass still in hand, and sat on the couch. She didn't ask me to join her. She didn't have to. I followed without thinking. We sat close, shoulders almost brushing. "I hated being called strong," she said quietly. "It always felt like people were telling me not to break." I looked at her. "You don't have to be strong right now." She turned to face me, her eyes wide but steady. "You're very different from the boy I remember." "I'm not a boy anymore." "I know." There it was again, the air between us shifting, something old giving way to something new. She leaned back against the cushions, her knees drawn up slightly, her hand resting on the edge of the throw blanket. I noticed the tiny scar on her wrist, faint, healed, but real. "What's that from?" I asked gently, nodding toward it. "Burned myself making tea. Years ago. You'd think I was baking for a war zone." I smiled. "You were the only teacher who brought real cookies to class." She grinned. "Bribery works. Don't let anyone tell you different." Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the room for a second in a wash of white. She flinched slightly. "Still hate that part." Without thinking, I reached out and gently touched her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled around mine. We sat like that for a long time, hands lightly entwined, silence settling over us like a blanket. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, it was quiet. Not empty, just still. "I never expected to feel this way again," she said. "What way?" "Like someone sees me, not for what I was, but for who I still am." I turned toward her. She was looking at me, eyes soft, guard down. I didn't move. Not yet. Then she whispered, "I'm scared." I nodded. "Me too." She didn't look away, so I did something I hadn't planned. I leaned forward, slow, careful, just enough that she could stop me if she wanted to. She didn't. Our lips met in a quiet, uncertain kiss. No rush, no desperation, just two people sitting in a storm, finding something they didn't know they were missing. When we pulled apart, she didn't speak. She just rested her forehead against mine, eyes closed, and whispered, "Stay." She said stay, and I did. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. There was no demand in her voice, no suggestion of expectation. It was just a word, one syllable, filled with all the things she couldn't say out loud. So I stayed, not out of obligation, but because every part of me wanted to. We didn't kiss again that night, at least not for a while. Instead, we sat on the couch with the storm pulsing outside the windows, thunder rattling like far-off memory. Rachel stood at some point to light another candle. The power had flickered, then gone out for a while, and its soft glow lit her face in a way I knew I wouldn't forget. She walked to a bookshelf and pulled out an old folder, the corners frayed and the spine barely holding. She brought it over and sat beside me again, closer this time. "You probably don't remember this," she said, handing it to me. I opened it and froze. Inside were student writings, short stories, poems, journals. My name was on at least 3 of them. "I used to save a few each year," she said. "The ones that made me stop and reread. Yours always did." I pulled out a folded sheet of lined paper. My handwriting, uneven, dramatic, too many dashes and scratched out words. It was a poem I wrote at 16. Something about windows and silence and wanting to be anywhere but where I was. "You kept this?" I asked. She nodded. "I don't know why exactly. Maybe because it felt like something real, something raw." I read the first few lines. I barely recognized the kid who had written it, but she had. "You always saw things that no one else noticed," she said quietly. That line, "even the shadows look tired in this room." I think I quoted that in a parent-teacher meeting. I looked at her. Was I that depressing? She smiled, but there was no mockery in it. "You were honest. There's a difference." I set the poem back down and looked at her. Something had shifted between us. Not because of the kiss, not because of the storm, but because we weren't pretending anymore. She reached over and touched the edge of my hand with her fingertips, not holding it, just resting there. I think I was afraid, she said. Of what? Of what it would mean to be seen by someone who knew me before I stopped trying, before I got tired, before I became a version of myself that felt like maintenance instead of growth. I didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing that felt true. I took her hand in mine, not gently, not forcefully, just there. I don't see aversion, I said. I see you. She looked at me, eyes glassy but calm. And then, slowly, she leaned in again. This time, I met her halfway. The kiss was different. It wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was slow, yes, but full. Full of everything we hadn't said. Full of everything we thought we'd buried with the past. Her hands moved up to the sides of my face, her fingers brushing along the line of my jaw, her breath catching slightly between kisses. My hand rested at her waist, warm beneath the hem of her sweater, feeling the softness of her skin and the quiet rhythm of her breath. No rush, no noise, just her, just me, just the truth between us. When we broke apart, her forehead rested against mine again. She closed her eyes. We didn't speak, because we didn't need to. Eventually, she stood. Her sweater slid slightly off her shoulder, and she didn't fix it. She didn't move like someone embarrassed or uncertain. She moved like someone who had made a choice. "I'll be right back," she said softly. She disappeared down the hallway. I sat there in the candlelight, staring at the poem in my lap. The ink had faded slightly. The lines weren't good, not by any real standard. But somehow, she had seen me through them, all those years ago. And now I was seeing her, the real her, not Miss Carter, not a figure from my school days, just Rachel, a woman who had given and finally wanted something to be hers. When she returned, she was wearing a loose t-shirt and pajama shorts. Her hair had been taken down, falling around her shoulders in soft waves. She held a folded blanket and another candle, which she placed on the coffee table. She sat beside me again, then leaned into me, her head against my chest. And we stayed like that, for a long time, wrapped in silence, in candlelight, in whatever this was between us. I thought maybe we would talk, about what it meant, about what came next. But we didn't, because sometimes naming a thing too early can break its shape. She whispered, at one point, "Don't go yet." "I won't," I replied. I didn't sleep on the couch, but I didn't sleep in her bed either. We curled up on that old, worn-out sectional. One blanket, two tangled souls. And when I woke up the next morning, her hand was still in mine. Morning came softly. No alarms, no noise, just the pale, silver light of early day spilling through half-closed blinds and the faint creak of the house settling as if exhaling after holding its breath all night. Rachel was still asleep beside me on the couch. Her head rested lightly on my shoulder, her hair cascading across the blanket. Her hand was still wrapped in mine, fingers relaxed now, but not withdrawn. Her breathing was slow and steady, peaceful in a way that made me afraid to move. So I didn't. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name. We hadn't talked about what had happened. We hadn't made plans or drawn lines or whispered promises into the dark. But none of it felt incomplete, felt whole, quiet, real. Eventually, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking into the morning, and then turned to look at me. "Hey," she whispered, voice hoarse with sleep. "Hey." A pause. She sat up slightly, brushing her hair behind her ear, and glanced around the room like she'd forgotten where we were. I didn't mean to fall asleep here, she said. I didn't mind. She looked at me for a second longer than she had to. Then she stood, stretching, and padded into the kitchen barefoot. I followed, slower. She poured 2 mugs of coffee without asking how I took it. Hers was in a chipped ceramic mug that read, "Read more, worry less," and mine, like last time, was plain and black. "Breakfast?" she asked. "Sure." She opened the fridge, pulled out some eggs, toast, and butter, and set to work. I leaned against the counter, watching her move, the rhythm of it all strangely comforting. This was a woman I had once feared disappointing with a late essay. Now she was standing in her kitchen, in pajama shorts and messy hair, making me scrambled eggs while Miles Davis played faintly from a speaker behind her. The world had tilted. Quietly, permanently. She slid a plate across the counter, then took her own and sat on the stool next to mine. We ate mostly in silence. Not awkward, just content. When we finished, she set down her fork and looked at me carefully. "What happens now?" she asked. Her voice wasn't nervous, just curious, cautious. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Neither do I." Another pause. "But," she added, "last night was real. Whatever else happens, that won't change." I nodded slowly. "I don't want to pretend it didn't matter." She smiled. "Good, because it did." We cleared the dishes together, her elbow bumping mine once at the sink. She laughed. That same quiet laugh I remembered from the classroom, except now it was softer, more intimate, less guarded. When we finished, I dried my hands and turned to her. "I should probably go before my mom starts asking questions." Rachel smirked. "Right? Can't have your reputation ruined by rumors of breakfast with a retired teacher. Would ruin my whole summer." She walked with me to the front door. The light outside was sharp now, cutting across the porch in bright slants. The storm was long gone. The world felt washed clean. We stood there for a moment, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. I stepped down one stair, then turned back. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For being here. For everything. For not pretending." She looked at me like she wanted to say something else, then stepped forward, reached up, and touched my face. Just once, like she had the night before. Gentle, sure. Her thumb brushed the edge of my cheekbone. And then she said, "You see me, Jake, and that means more than I can ever explain." I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't try. I just nodded, memorizing the way she looked in that light. No longer Miss Carter, no longer the woman who stood in front of a blackboard with a red pen in hand. Just Rachel, just herself. And me, no longer a boy in the back of her class, but a man she had let in. As I walked down the path toward my car, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I had found something, a connection that didn't need a label, a moment that didn't need defining. And as I slid into the driver's seat, the final line of a story I didn't know I'd been writing formed clearly in my mind. She used to be my teacher, but that night she was just a woman.